Alden Whitlow came back to himself the way a diver surfaces through late afternoon light, slow, disoriented, lungs burning for air he wasn't sure he had. First there was the cottony taste in his mouth. Then the press of satin at his temples. Then the smell, lilies, floor wax, and that dry, powdery chill that only exists in funeral homes. He tried to swallow and couldn't. He tried to lift his hands and found them folded too neatly on his chest. When he opened his eyes, all he could see at first was cream fabric pleated like a wedding dress turned inside out. A coffin lid. Mine.
Panik came in hart wave.
His heart kicked, his breath turned shallow, and a high whine lit up behind his ears. He forced himself to count 4 in, 6 out the way a performance coach had once taught him before earnings calls. Air moved. Not much but enough. Thought trickled back. Where am I?
Riverside Chapel.
The viewing room. Thursday? Friday? How long? He tested his fingers. Nothing. Toes. A spark in the right big toe, the faintest twitch in the left pinky. The rest of him was stone. He wanted to shout. The muscles in his throat delivered only a ragged exhale that brushed his upper lip and fogged the satin for a heartbeat. Then voices. Close.
Familia.
Thought we'd never be done with it, a woman said, low and bright with relief.
Marla.
His wife. The syllables slotted into place like a key turning. Another voice, male, younger, edged with admiration and nerves.
Treu. Jure relentless, you know that?
I was sure he'd die on that bridge. The crash was perfect and then, nothing. And then the mugging. Don't say mugging, Marla snapped, soft enough that anyone 10 feet away would miss the steel. Say nothing. We're almost finished. Alden shut his eyes again, as if sight had betrayed him. Heat rushed to his cheeks, and cold rolled down his spine. He listened. The chapel hummed faintly with air conditioning.
Summe wäre, a compressor clicked on.
Footsteps creaked on old wood. Fabric whispered. Marla's perfume green apple, white musk bloomed over the lilies. He had suspected. Not this. Not the cruelty of it spoken out loud, next to his body. You were just tired, he told himself months ago when the ladder slid, while he was replacing a porch bulb and the rungs bit his shins. You didn't sleep last night, that's why you stepped into the street without looking. You miscounted your pills, that's why you woke choking and couldn't move for almost a minute. Bad luck is just luck. Do you think anyone will suspect? Troy asked, trying to keep it casual and failing. Keegan might, Marla said, and Alden felt her name like a thumb on a bruise.
Keegan Holt.
The one person who'd seen through Alden's careful, private habits to the man who wrote thank you notes by hand and remembered which receptionist had a kid in marching band. He's loyal to a fault. But loyal isn't smart. Alden swallowed glass.
Keegan was smart.
He was careful. He was the reason Whitlow Holdings had held course through a market storm that had wrecked 3 competitors. The power of attorney they'd notarized, just in case, lived in Keegan's desk because Alden trusted him more than his own patients. He pictured Keegan receiving the text from Marla. He wanted a private ceremony. Family only. He pictured Keegan standing on the far sidewalk anyway, just in case, and deciding, finally, to honor Alden's wish not to make a spectacle of grief. I'm not staying after they drive him back to his little hometown, Marla continued.
Let Mika handle sediert.
We sign where we have to. I don't like this place. Because it smells like bleach? Troy teased. Because it smells like him, she said, and the last word dropped into the coffin like a stone. Alden let the sentence move through him and out, like a riptide you don't fight. He listened harder. People drifted in and out, a murmur of condolences, a hand on wood, the controlled breath of a director trained to sound kind and not linger. Marla played the part well. He could hear the sighs, the damp tissue, the practiced tremor. Troy played the friend, the hand on the back, the clasped shoulder. The performance had fooled everyone. It had almost fooled him. Memory broke loose in clean, brutal frames. The SUV that didn't see him as he jogged dawn miles along the river trail. The way its headlights wobbled like drunk stars.
The horn, Tollate.
His stumble into gravel, the skin off his palms for a week. The house alarm that glitched the one night he slept alone, then reset itself when the police lights bounced down the block. The peppery taste in his scotch 2 nights later, so mild he thought he'd imagined it, and the long viscous paralysis that rolled over him like tar, leaving his mind lit and his limbs dead for 40 seconds that felt like a year. He had chalked it up to overwork and grief and the lonely strangeness that had settled on his marriage since his father died. Marla's nightmares about older men with gray hair. Marla's refusal to meet his parents even for brunch. Marla's careful pivot to a big shoot in Seattle that always fell on the one weekend his mother could fly in. He had wanted to be generous. He had wanted to believe the bruises were from her bar class and not from stumbling in the dark after dosing him. Move, he told his hand.
Move, damn you. The pinky twitched again. The toe obeyed a millimeter.
A relief so sharp it hurt washed him.
You are not dead.
You are here. And if you are here, there is a way out. He measured space. The lid seemed sealed, the fabric muffled sound but didn't smother. If he could make noise, any noise, Micah Vale, the gravedigger in his hometown, would hear it later. Micah had dug his grandparents' plots. The man talked to stones like they were neighbors. If there was a soul anywhere on this planet who would pause at a sound from a box, it was Micah. But that meant surviving transport. That meant conserving breath. That meant not letting panic spend the oxygen his brain needed to keep the fear from swallowing him whole. He pictured Keegan's face square, stubbled by 5 p.m., eyes that went soft when he smiled. He pictured the post-it Keegan had slapped on the edge of Alden's monitor 6 months back. Eat. Please. K. He pictured the way Keegan had stood in the doorway the night Alden's father's will was read, quietly absorbing the legalese so Alden didn't have to hear his own name alongside a list of holdings like a cattle brand. Tell Keegan, he ordered himself. Find a way.
If you live, make your life worth a miracle.
Outside, a door hissed shut. The air texture changed, fewer voices, farther away. The wake was thinning. Marla's tone brightened, that after-party lilt she used when she knew a photographer had finally put the camera down. Let's go, Troy said.
In a minute, Marla murmuret. A hand slid along the coffin's edge.
Alden felt the vibration in his bones. For a wild second, hope leaped. She's going to open it, she's going to see, she's going to stop this, but the hand stilled, and the hope died, and the lid remained a sky he could not touch. You were never supposed to be anything but a means, she whispered so close that the wood carried her voice to him.
And now you're a memory.
That's cleaner. Footsteps. The hush after them tasted like dust. Alden counted. 4 in. 6 out. He named what he could sense to keep the terror from multiplying. Lilies, satin, wood grain under velvet, the faint motor of a ceiling vent. He catalogued pain to prove he was still a person, the dull ache at his tailbone, the pinch at his right shoulder blade, the needle-sting track in the crook of his arm where someone had pushed something that caged his body while leaving his mind awake. He thought of the last ordinary minutes, the pizza box on the coffee table, the way Marla had laughed and told him to shower so he'd smell like a person, not a treadmill, the cold rim of the wineglass, the heat of her mouth when she handed it to him like a prop in a scene. He remembered telling himself to be grateful for the truce, and he remembered the floor sliding away, and he remembered her voice saying something cheerful about cheese getting stiff. He could not afford the luxury of anger.
Anger ran hot.
Hot burned oxygen. Oxygen was survival. Breathe. Wiggle. Wait.
Summe wäre VAW, a cat squeaked.
A hum deepened. A door opened and closed. The chapel settled into its late-day quiet, the kind that makes a summer storm feel a town over. He pressed attention into his right pinky, sent command, felt it answer with a juddering tremor that made tears swim. Keegan, he told the ceiling he couldn't see.
Micah.
Emma, he did not know the name yet, not really, but fate was already stitching her into his future.
Hold me in your world a little longer. I am not done.
He closed his eyes to save moisture and strength. Above him, the room exhaled. Below him, his toe twitched again once, twice, like a code in training. And inside a box designed for endings, Alden Whitlow chose a beginning. The road to Alderfield Cemetery wound like a spine through fields of dry grass, the kind that whispered even without wind. The hearse moved slow, tires humming a hymn under the soft roll of thunder in the west. In the front seat, the driver kept the radio low, a preacher talking about forgiveness, and behind him, a coffin that should have been silent, but wasn't. Inside, Alden Whitlow felt every bump.
The toots of gravel under the tires came up through the floor like distant heartbeats.
His eyelids fluttered with each jolt, the dim light sneaking in through the cracks of the lid just enough for him to know the difference between day and night. His lungs fought for space. The air had gone stale hours ago, thick with his own breath, heavy like warm plastic. Sweat slicked his temples and crawled down the sides of his neck. He counted again. 4 in. 6 out. Each breath scratched his throat like sandpaper. When he tried to move, his right hand spasmed barely. The middle finger jerked once, then again. It was something. He clung to that. The pain helped too, it told him he was still alive. He imagined Micah Vale, the old gravedigger who'd worked in this cemetery longer than anyone else in Alderfield. He imagined his slow gait, the tobacco smell, the way his hands always carried a tremor when he folded them to pray before each burial. If Micah was still the one in charge, maybe, just maybe, he'd notice something. A sound. A sign. Anything. Alden wasn't religious, but he prayed anyway. "Please," he whispered, the word thinner than a breath, "let him hear me." Outside, the day was gray. Rain threatened but never came. The hearse rolled into the gates, where a wooden sign still read Alderfield Memorial Grounds, established 1899.
The metal hinges Grund.
Behind the hearse followed a dark sedan Marla's. Her face behind the tinted window was unreadable. In the back seat sat Troy Kincaid, sunglasses on, head turned toward her. Neither of them spoke during the drive. There was nothing left to say. When the vehicles stopped, Marla got out first, feigning the weight of grief. She wore a black dress, simple but precise, her red hair pinned back. The local pastor, old Reverend Boyd, walked to greet her with a soft voice and a Bible tucked under one arm. She clasped his hand with the grace of a widow who'd practiced her part. "Thank you for your kindness," she said. "He was a good man, Mrs.
Whitlow.
The town's proud to lay him to rest here. I'm sure he'd appreciate that." Troy stayed a few steps behind, sunglasses still on even as the clouds thickened. He didn't want to look anyone in the eye. He didn't need to. His part was simple. Keep quiet, keep moving, make sure she didn't break character. The workers lowered the casket onto a frame above a half-dug grave. Micah Vale, lean and weathered, adjusted the straps with steady hands. His dog, Scoia'ta Brown Mutt with a white muzzle, sat near his feet, ears twitching. Micah tipped his cap at Marla, then looked briefly at the coffin. He had buried hundreds, but something about this one made his stomach tight. Maybe it was the way the polished oak seemed to vibrate softly, or maybe it was the faint knock, so faint he thought it was the wind against the van doors earlier. "Ready when you are, ma'am," Micah said. Marla nodded, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. "Go ahead. I can't bear to watch." She turned and walked toward her car, motioning for Troy to follow. "We'll wait at the inn," she murmured. "Call me when it's done." They left before the first shovelful of dirt touched the ground. Micah watched their taillights disappear beyond the gate, rain beginning to spit from the clouds. Scout barked once, sharp and sudden. The men working beside him, 2 young assistants, started lowering the coffin slowly, ropes squeaking under the weight. "That'll do," Micah said, and the boys paused to wipe their hands. He glanced at the box again. Something inside him tugged a whisper of doubt, a prayer half remembered. "You boys go get the tarp from the shed," he said.
Looks like it's gonna pour.
When they jogged off, Micah crouched beside the grave and leaned closer. The air had shifted, even Scout went still, head tilted, ears stiff. Then, barely there, like someone dragging a finger against wood, came a sound.
Tap.
A pause. Tap tap. Micah froze. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the sound came again, weak, uneven but real. Scout whined, tail between his legs. Micah's heart kicked against his ribs. "Holy Lord," he muttered.
Zet eins Wind.
He stood up fast and shouted toward the shed.
Boys. Get back here.
Now. When the helpers returned, panting, he was already untying the ropes. "What's wrong, sir?" one of them asked. "Help me get this lid open. There's someone." He stopped himself. He didn't want to sound crazy. "Just do it. Hurry." They scrambled, working the metal clasps and prying at the edges with a crowbar. Mud stuck to their boots as rain began to fall harder. Scout barked frantically, circling the grave. The sound from inside grew faint but unmistakable, thuds mixed with gasps, like someone clawing at the air.
Vis von final hief, the lid kriegt open.
What they saw made all 3 men stumble back. Alden Whitlow lay inside, drenched in sweat, his skin pale as marble but his eyes wide and alive, rolling wildly at the sight of open sky. His lips parted, trembling around a word that didn't come out. His chest heaved. "Jesus Almighty," whispered one of the helpers, crossing himself. "Get him out," Micah barked, snapping from shock into motion. He grabbed Alden's shoulders gently. "Easy, son. You're safe now." Alden tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped, dry and raw like paper. His fingers twitched, gripping Micah's sleeve with desperate strength. Micah glanced at the others. "Blanket. Now. And water." Emma Vale, Micah's niece, appeared at the edge of the hill, umbrella in hand. She had come to visit her uncle, not expecting chaos. The sight of men leaning over an open casket froze her mid-step.
"What's happening?" she called out.
Micah turned toward her.
"Emma, get over here, call Doc Keller.
"Tell him we've got a live one. Tell him," he looked down at Alden's trembling chest, "tell him it's urgent." Emma dropped the umbrella, phone already in her hand. "Oh my God," she whispered as she ran closer. She knelt beside the coffin, her face inches from Alden's. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes focused on her barely.
He managed a faint note.
"Don't try to move," she said softly.
"You're okay. You're not alone."
Tears welled up in her eyes before she even realized it. She had worked part-time as a counselor's assistant in town, but she had never seen trauma like this, someone literally buried alive. Micah and the men lifted Alden from the coffin, their hands trembling. The rain now came down hard, soaking their clothes and washing the dust from the grave. They carried him into the small tool shed nearby and laid him on a cot that usually held shovels and ropes. Scout curled near his feet, whining softly. Emma returned with a thermos of water and a blanket from her uncle's truck.
She knelt again, wiping the rain from Alden's face.
"Sip this. Slowly." He obeyed, taking a shallow drink that burned down his throat like fire. Then another. Color started to crawl back into his cheeks. Name? She asked gently.
Can you tell me your name?
He swallowed, eyes closing from the effort. Alden, he whispered. Emma gasped.
Alden Whitlow.
Micah looked up sharply. You know him? Everyone in town knows him, Uncle. He owns half the buildings on Main Street. Well, Micah muttered, seems like he owns his life too, for the second time. Alden stirred, trying to sit, but Emma pressed a hand to his shoulder. Easy.
Don't push it.
You need a hospital. No, he croaked, shaking his head weakly.
No hospital.
Not yet. Emma frowned. You need help. If they know, his voice cracked. Marla will finish it. Emma looked at Micah, confused. Who's Marla? His wife, Micah said, his brow furrowing as realization began to bloom. The woman who brought him here. Alden coughed, forcing air through his dry throat. She tried to kill me.
Don't tell her I'm alive.
Please. Emma froze. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She glanced at her uncle, who stared back, the gravity of the situation settling like wet earth around them. All right, Micah said at last, voice steady and low.
Nobody's gonna know. Not until you're strong enough to tell the law yourself.
He turned to his niece.
Emma, take my truck.
Drive him to Keller's clinic in town. I'll stay and handle the rest. The rest? She echoed. Micah's eyes shifted toward the empty coffin. We'll put it back like it was. Folks'll think he's in there. It'll buy him time. Emma hesitated.
You can't mean. Donnerstag.
Now go, before anyone drives by. Emma nodded, adrenaline taking over. She helped Alden to his feet, looping his arm around her shoulders. He was taller than she expected, but his weight was like a ghost's barely there. They stumbled to the truck, Scout trotting beside them until Micah called him back. As she eased Alden into the passenger seat, Emma felt the chill of his skin through his torn shirt. He closed his eyes, exhausted but alive. She started the engine, tires spitting mud as they left the cemetery behind. Back at the gravesite, Micah wiped the rain from his face and stared at the coffin one last time. He whispered a prayer over it, asking for forgiveness for what he was about to do. Then, with his helper's quiet cooperation and a heavy heave, they lowered the empty casket into the ground and began to cover it with soil. By the time the last shovel hit the mound, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke open, and a sliver of sunlight hit the polished nameplate on the fake grave.
Alden J.
Whitlow, beloved husband and visionary. Micah removed his cap, murmuring, "Beloved, my foot." The ride to the small-town hospital took 30 minutes, though it felt like 3 hours. Alden drifted in and out of consciousness, jolting awake whenever the truck hit a bump. Emma kept one hand on the wheel and one on his wrist, checking his pulse every few minutes. "You're safe," she said every time his eyes opened.
Vire almostere.
He tried to thank her, but the words broke apart before they left his mouth. He leaned his head back, the world outside a blur of telephone poles and gray sky. When they finally reached Alderfield Community Hospital, Emma pulled around to the back entrance, where she knew the night nurse would be on duty, a friend from her psychology classes. She hurried inside and found Nurse Carla, who looked up from her paperwork in shock when she saw Alden's condition.
Emma, wat in Gottes Name?
Please, Emma cut her off, no questions right now. He needs fluids, oxygen, maybe a mild sedative. He's been through something horrible. Who is he?
Emma hesitated only a second.
My cousin. He collapsed while visiting. It wasn't a lie, exactly just survival. Within minutes, they had Alden on a gurney, 4 lines in his arm, monitors beeping softly. His pulse steadied, color returning by degrees. When Carla left to grab more supplies, Emma sat beside him, watching the slow rhythm of his breathing. For the first time, Alden's eyes opened fully. The clarity in them startled her.
You saved me, he whispered. Emma shook her head. No. You saved yourself.
I just helped. A small, ghostly smile flickered at the corner of his lips. Either way, he said, I owe you everything. She smiled back, but behind her calm face, her mind raced. Whoever had done this would think he was gone. And that was their advantage for now. Outside, thunder rolled again, but inside the tiny hospital room, there was warmth. A second chance had just begun, and both of them, though neither fully realized it, yet had stepped into a story that would bind their fates together far beyond that night. Morning crept into Alderfield Hospital like a shy guest, thin light slipping through half-closed blinds, painting soft stripes over the walls. The night storm had rinsed the town clean, leaving a pale haze above the hills.
Inside Room 204, Alden Whitlow stiert avake, still half-treppet Bettwehen Nightmare and Life.
The smell of antiseptic burned his nose, the beep of a monitor echoed too loud, and for a moment he forgot where he was. Then the memory slammed into him, the coffin, Marla's voice, the dirt inches from his face, and he bolted upright with a hoarse cry. Easy, easy, said Emma Vale, stepping forward, her voice calm but steady as she pressed a hand to his shoulder.
You're safe here. You're not underground anymore.
Alden's eyes darted around, wild and confused, until they found hers. There was something in Emma's gaze steady like the horizon after a storm that anchored him. His chest rose and fell. The panic began to break apart.
Hospital. He rasped.
She nodded. Small one. My uncle and I brought you here last night. You passed out before we made it to town. He swallowed hard. Does anyone know?
Only me, my uncle Mika, and the night nurse.
We said you were my cousin, visiting from out of state. No one's asking questions. Good, Alden murmured, closing his eyes. Keep it that way. Emma hesitated before pulling a chair closer to his bed. I don't know what happened to you, but she searched his face, seeing the bruises, the marks on his wrists, the faint imprint of fabric across his forehead from the inside of the coffin. No one deserves that. Alden looked at her for a long moment, his voice barely more than a whisper. My wife did this.
Emma's breath caught.
She wanted to believe she had misheard. Your wife. He nodded slowly.
Marla.
With her lover, Troy Kincaid. They tried to kill me. She thought I'd died after she poisoned me. Too heard her talking about it at my own funeral. His voice broke on the last word.
Te burit ml alive.
The room went very still. Outside, a bird sang in the courtyard, oblivious to the horror suspended in that sterile space. Emma didn't speak right away, she just reached for the pitcher on the table and poured him a glass of water. When he took it, his hand shook. She steadied it with her own. You need to rest, she said softly, but you also need protection. If she finds out you're alive. She won't, he interrupted. Not yet. I can't let her know until I have proof. She's too smart to confess unless she's cornered. I need someone I can trust. He looked straight at her. And I think I already found two. Emma felt the weight of his gratitude, unexpected and heavy. She wasn't used to being needed not like this. Uncle Micah and I aren't exactly detectives, she said with a small smile, trying to lighten the moment. Maybe not, Alden replied, but you believed me. That's more than anyone else would have done. By noon, the hospital hallway buzzed with nurses, but Emma stayed by Alden's side, helping him sit up and eat spoonfuls of soup. His movements were stiff, his muscles trembled as if remembering the coffin's walls. She talked about small things, the weather, the local kids' fair, her dog Scouto keep his mind from drifting back to the grave. But when she mentioned calling someone for help, Alden's tone sharpened. There is one person, he said.
Keegan holt. My business partner more like my brother, really.
He's the only one I ever trusted. He has something of mine.
A notarized document.
It gives him control of the company if anything ever happened to me. Emma frowned slightly. So if everyone thinks you're dead, then Keegan's in charge right now. Alden's lips pressed into a thin line. Which means Marla might go after him next, once she realizes she can't access the money. She won't sit still long. Emma crossed her arms, her practical side kicking in. Then you need to contact him. Quietly. Do you remember his number? Alden nodded.
Donnerstag.
But I can't risk calling from my phone, she might have it traced. Then use mine, Emma said, handing it over without hesitation.
No one will connect it to you.
Alden hesitated, his hand trembling slightly as he took the phone. The act of trusting someone new still felt foreign, like walking barefoot on ice. But he dialed anyway. The call connected on the third ring.
Keegan holt, came a deep, steady voice.
Alden's throat tightened.
Keegan, it's me. Silence.
Then a sharp inhale. Whoever this isn't funny. Alden's dead. No, I'm not, Alden said. They tried, but they failed.
Listen to me, don't say my name again.
Just listen.
Keegan's voice trembled. Where are you?
In Alderfield. The hospital. But no one can know.
Marla and Troy.
I knew something was wrong, Keegan interrupted, voice rising. She was too calm. The paperwork's been pushing for transfers, but I've stalled. My God, Alden, what did they do to you? Later, Alden said firmly.
I need your help now.
I want to bring them down legally, cleanly. But we have to move like ghosts until I'm ready. You'll have it, Keegan replied without hesitation.
Warte für you need.
Before hanging up, Alden said one last thing, tell no one. And if anyone asks, I'm gone. For now. He ended the call, exhaling slowly. The fight in him, quiet for days, flickered alive again. Emma watched him closely. He's coming, isn't he? Alden nodded. He'll be here before sunset. Late that afternoon, the hospital smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked linen when Keegan Holt arrived. Tall, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes and the weight of a sleepless week etched into his face, he slipped through the back entrance under a borrowed nurse's jacket Emma had arranged. She guided him down the hall with quiet efficiency, her sneakers squeaking softly on the tile. When he entered the room, Alden looked up and the two men locked eyes. Keegan froze, disbelief melting into a rush of relief so fierce it looked painful. Jesus, Alden, he whispered, and in 2 steps he was at the bedside, gripping his friend's hand. You're really here.
Barely, Alden managed a smile.
But thanks to her. He nodded toward Emma.
Meet Emma Wale.
My rescuer. Keegan turned to her, gratitude clear in his tone.
You have no idea what you we done.
Thank you. Emma blushed slightly. Just doing what anyone would. No, Alden said quietly. Not anyone. They talked for nearly an hour. Alden explained everything from the poisoned wine to the voices he heard while trapped inside the coffin. Keegan listened, his jaw tight, fists clenching every few minutes. By the end, his anger had settled into something colder and sharper, resolve. So she thinks you're dead, Keegan said finally. That's our advantage. Alden nodded. Exactly. We'll let her think she's won. For now. Emma tilted her head. But to do what?
You can't just hide forever.
No, Alden said, but we can use her confidence against her. People who think they've buried their mistakes tend to talk. They brag, slip, trust the wrong person. He looked at Emma. You said your uncle's friend on the police force is reliable? Emma nodded.
Detektive waren.
He's known my family since I was a kid. I can talk to him quietly. Good, Alden said. We'll need him. But not yet. First, we need evidence. Keegan's voice dropped.
You mean a confession?
Alden leaned back against the pillow, mind whirring despite the exhaustion in his bones. Exactly. And she'll give it to Yusuf. She thinks she's in control. Emma frowned.
How do you make Someone like that talk?
By feeding their ego, Alden replied.
Malas Brot.
She wants credit for her revenge. She'll spill everything to the right person if she feels safe. Someone who seems sympathetic. Keegan raised an eyebrow. And who's going to play that part? Alden's gaze slid to Emma. She blinked. Wait me. You're the only one she doesn't know, he said. You could approach her as I don't know, someone connected to the hospital, or even a journalist. She won't suspect a small-town counselor. Emma hesitated. That's risky. Everything about this is risky, Alden said, his tone steady but gentle. But I won't let her hurt anyone else. I just need to prove what she did to me, to the police, to the courts. After that, she can rot in her own lies. For a moment, no one spoke.
Ze hummet vis unspoken vier Adrenaline.
Finally, Emma exhaled and nodded. All right. But we do this carefully. I'll talk to Detective Warren first, make sure we have backup. If we're recording her, it has to be legal. Otherwise, she walks free. Keegan smiled grimly. Spoken like someone who's seen too many true crime shows. Emma grinned faintly. My mother was obsessed with them.
The small flicker of humor broke the tension.
For the first time since waking in the coffin, Alden allowed himself to laugh a raw, quiet laugh that hurt his ribs but reminded him he was alive. That evening, while the hospital lights dimmed and the night staff traded shifts, Emma sat in the visitor's chair, helping Alden write a list of everything he remembered, details, scents, fragments of dialogue, even the brand of wine Marla had poured. Each note was another brick in the wall of proof they would build. Outside the window, the rain started again, a slow patter that whispered against the glass. Alden paused, staring at his reflection in the darkness. I used to think success made me untouchable, he said quietly. Money, property, status, none of it meant anything when I couldn't even lift my hand to save my own life. You know what did matter? Emma looked up from the notepad. What?
The sound of another human being.
That faint hope someone would hear me. That's what kept me alive.
Emma smiled softly.
And someone did. Alden nodded. Yeah. You did.
T sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain.
Then he added, when this is over, I want to do something different. Something that matters. Emma tilted her head, curiosity bright in her eyes. Like what? I don't know yet, he said. But maybe I'll start by making sure you never have to buy your own umbrella again. Emma laughed, the sound lightening the sterile room. Deal. But only if you promise to stay out of coffins from now on. Promise, Alden said, really smiling this time, the first true one since his nightmare began. By midnight, the plan was clear. Emma would contact Detective Warren in secret to ensure the recordings were lawful. Keegan would handle legal documents and monitor Marla's movements through the company's security team, and Alden, still weak but determined, would recover quietly under a new alias, Alex Ward, a supposed cousin visiting town for recovery therapy. It was fragile, dangerous, and built entirely on trust. But it was something. And as the rain whispered against the glass, Alden Whitlow, buried once by betrayal, began to feel the first real stirrings of resurrection. The morning broke cold and sharp over Alderfield, sunlight slanting through the mist that clung to the trees. Inside the Vale family farmhouse, Emma stood in the kitchen with a mug of coffee going cold in her hands. Her uncle Micah was already gone for the day, out at the cemetery as usual, while Alden and Keegan Holt sat at the old oak table surrounded by papers, cords, and a jumble of recording equipment that looked more like a spy kit than anything belonging in a small-town kitchen. The plan had taken shape overnight. Every angle, every risk, discussed again and again until dawn. Now it was time to act. "Let's go through this one more time," Emma said, pacing slowly between the stove and the table. She had tied her hair back, sleeves rolled up, a legal pad in her hand. "We can't afford a single mistake." Alden leaned forward, elbows on the table. The bruises beneath his shirt collar had begun to fade, but the haunted look in his eyes had not.
Wie Cole Mahler.
"You tell her you know what she did."
You say you want to make a deal money in exchange for the length.
"That's bait she won't resist." Keegan adjusted the small microphone hidden in a brooch pinned to Emma's blouse. "The wire transmits to the recorder in your purse. Audio only.
No video until she's inside the house."
Emma frowned slightly. "You're sure this is legal?" Keegan nodded.
Detektive waren cleared it.
"He'll have his men nearby, unmarked car down the road. They'll move in once she confesses or once we signal. But remember, no sudden moves."
She's dangerous.
Alden's hand curled around the edge of the table. "She'll think she's still in control. That's what will make her talk." His voice was quiet, but beneath it ran steel. Emma studied him for a moment, the set of his jaw, the exhaustion behind his resolve. She couldn't decide whether to feel pity or admiration. Maybe both. What if she brings someone with her? "She will," Alden said flatly.
Treuigkeit.
"She never does her own dirty work. But that works in our favor. 2 witnesses, 2 confessions." Keegan checked his watch. "Then we'd better start setting the stage." By noon, the 3 of them drove to the Whitlow family estate on the edge of town, an elegant, ivy-clad house that had sat empty since Alden's supposed death. The iron gates groaned as they opened, the long gravel drive littered with fallen leaves. It was eerie, returning here. For Alden, it felt like walking through a ghost version of his own life. The house smelled faintly of dust and lavender, the kind of scent meant to cover something older, grief or memory. In the grand living room, sun filtered through tall windows onto polished floors. It was there they set the trap. Keegan unpacked the gear with military precision. 2 micro cameras the size of buttons went onto the bookshelf and above the mantel. Another inside a flower vase near the window. The recorder was hidden behind a photo frame, one of Alden and his parents on the day his company went public. Emma stood in the doorway, watching silently. "It feels wrong," she said softly. "Like we're building a stage for pain." Alden looked up at her, eyes gentle. "Pain's already here, Emma. We're just giving it a spotlight." When everything was ready, Keegan pulled his phone from his pocket. "You want me to call her, or should Emma?" Emma took a deep breath, set down her coffee, and reached for the phone. "I'll do it. She doesn't know my voice." Alden nodded, giving her the number from memory. As she dialed, the line clicked once, twice, then connected. A woman's voice answered, smooth, measured, deceptively warm. "Hello. Mrs.
Whitlow."
Emma began, keeping her tone polite but firm.
Mein Name ist Emma Wahle.
"I think we should talk about your husband." There was a long pause, the kind of silence that stretched like a wire about to snap.
What about my husband?
Emma glanced at Alden, who mouthed, "Keep her hooked." "I know he's not resting where everyone thinks he is," Emma continued. "Let's just say I have reason to believe he's alive. And that you'd want to keep it that way privately." The voice on the other end sharpened, silk turning to steel. "Who told you that?" "No one," Emma said. "But information like this tends to attract the wrong kind of attention. I'm not one of them. I just want to be compensated for my silence."
Another silence.
Then a soft, calculated laugh.
You're clever.
Or desperate. Which is it? Emma smiled despite the chill in her chest. A bit of both, maybe.
Marla exhaled slowly, the sound almost a poor. Fine. Text me the address and time. Il come alone.
And if you're lying, her voice dropped to a whisper, "You'll wish you hadn't called." The line went dead. Emma set the phone down, her hand trembling slightly. "She's coming," she said quietly. "She bought it." Alden's jaw tightened. "She always takes the bait. Just like she took mine." Evening fell early, the sky bruised purple as storm clouds gathered again. Inside the Whitlow house, the trap was set. The living room lights were dimmed to a warm glow, soft enough to hide the cameras but bright enough to keep everything visible on film. A pot of coffee sat untouched on the table, beside a half-empty envelope of cash, another piece of bait. Emma paced the floor, nerves fraying. What if she figures it out before she talks? What if she realizes? "She won't," Alden interrupted. He stood near the window, dressed in a simple gray sweater and jeans, alive, but not ready to be seen.
Marla only says what she wants.
She believes she's smarter than everyone else. That's her weakness. Keegan adjusted the earpiece in Emma's ear. "We'll be listening the whole time from the study. Just keep her talking. Detective Warren's team will be 10 minutes away, ready to move once we confirm a confession." Emma nodded, drawing in a deep breath. "And if she's armed?" Alden's gaze flickered. "She won't shoot. Not here. She's too vain to die in a scandal."
The sound of Tires on Gravel Coot trug the silence.
Headlights flared through the windows. Emma froze. "She's here." The black sedan rolled to a stop at the base of the steps. From behind the curtain, Alden watched as Marla Whitlow stepped out, tall, poised, wrapped in a long charcoal coat, her red hair pinned in a perfect knot. Beside her came Troy Kincaid, looking less confident, glancing around the dark yard like a man walking into his own judgment. Marla's heels clicked on the marble as she entered the foyer. The door creaked open, and Emma stepped forward to greet her. "Mrs. Whitlow," she said calmly. Marla's eyes were cold, appraising.
"Miss Wale. So you raise one who can't mind here on business."
Emma smiled faintly. "I prefer to call it opportunity." Troy stood by the door, restless, his gaze flicking toward the hall. "You sure this is smart?" he muttered. Marla ignored him. She walked slowly into the living room, scanning the space, the photos, the furniture, the very air. Her gloved hand trailed along the edge of the sofa. "I haven't been here since the service. Funny how memory plays tricks, it still smells like him." Emma gestured to the seat across from her. "Please.
Sit."
Marla did, crossing her legs with effortless grace. "Now, tell me why I'm here before I lose patience."
Emma leaned forward. "Because you buried Arman alive, Mrs. Whitlow."
"And I can prove it."
The words landed like stones in still water.
Troy froze.
Marla blinked once, slowly, ten gave a small, dangerous smile. "You're braver than you look."
"Or stupider." "I'm just honest," Emma replied. He told me everything before she paused for effect before he died. About the wine. About the bridge. About you. For a fraction of a second, Marla's mask cracked. Her fingers clenched against her knee, and her pupils dilated.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I think I do, Emma said evenly. Your husband's friend, Keegan Holt, he's suspicious too. He's seen the paperwork. It's only a matter of time before people start asking questions.
Marla's smile vanished. What do you want?
Money, Emma said simply. 200,000 in cash.
You pay me, I disappear.
Otherwise, I go to the police or worse, to the press.
Troy stepped closer.
You're crazy. We didn't. Marla shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Shut up, Troy. The silence that followed was suffocating.
Ten Marla laughed softly, almost pitying.
You think you're the first person to threaten me? Sweetheart, I've been dealing with vultures my whole life. But you, she leaned forward. You don't even know what you're standing in the middle of. Emma met her gaze. Then enlighten me. Something in Marla shifted, maybe pride, maybe fury. She stood, pacing in slow circles, the heels of her boots tapping against the floor.
You want a story?
Fine. You'll get one. Her voice dropped, low and venomous. I married Alden for one reason, to destroy him. Not for his money, not for love. For revenge. His father, Ralph Whitlow, ruined my life when I was 19. He hurt me in ways you couldn't imagine. And when I found out Alden was his son, it felt like fate. Emma held her breath.
The microphones caught a word.
I didn't plan to fall into bed with Troy, but accidents happen, Marla went on, smiling coldly at her lover. And Alden was too trusting. I just had to wait for the right time. The poison was clean, fast, or so I thought.
I even reersetze tears.
I deserved the performance of a lifetime after what his family did to me. Troy swallowed hard.
Marla, stop talking.
Shut up, she snapped, voice cracking.
You think I care what te do to Emil now?
It's done. He's dead. Actually, said a voice from the doorway, deep and calm, he's not. Marla froze. Her head turned slowly toward the source of the sound, and there he was.
Alden Whitlow, alive, standing under the soft glow of the chandelier.
The world seemed to tilt.
Troy stumbled back.
Marla's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time since she'd met him, she looked truly afraid. No, she whispered. No, this isn't real. You're dead. I watched. You watched me die, Alden said evenly, stepping closer. And you enjoyed it. Her face twisted, fury and disbelief warring in her eyes.
How did you?
Doesn't matter, he cut her off. What matters is you just confessed. Every word. It's all recorded. From the corner of the room, Keegan appeared, pulling a small device from his pocket. Smile, Marla. You're on camera. At that same moment, the front door burst open. Detective Warren and 2 officers entered, badges gleaming. Marla Whitlow, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy, he declared. You have the right to remain silent. But Marla wasn't listening. She was staring at Alden, her creation, her ghost, her failure. You don't understand, she said, voice breaking. I didn't mean to, I just wanted him to feel what I felt. Alden's face softened, not with pity but with exhaustion. You could have asked for help. You could have told the truth.
But you Kose hatte.
The officers stepped forward, cuffing her hands. She didn't fight. Troy, trembling, raised his own hands in surrender. As they led them out, Marla turned one last time, her eyes blazing.
You think you won, Alden? You'll never sleep again. You'll see every time you close your eyes.
Maybe, he said quietly. But at least I'll wake up. When the door shut behind the officers, silence filled the house again, deep, fragile, holy. Emma exhaled shakily, her legs finally giving way as she sank into a chair. Keegan turned off the recorder, the red light fading to black. Alden stood still for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway where Marla had stood. Then, slowly, he turned toward Emma and Keegan. "It's over," he said. The words sounded strange, as if he didn't quite believe them.
Emma Rose steppet closer. "No, Alden.
It's just beginning." Outside, the police lights pulsed against the windows, red and blue flickering like heartbeats, and for the first time in weeks, the air inside the Whitlow home felt clean again.
Summe wäre in the Distanz, Tanda rollet, low and steady, like Applause for the living.
The night that followed the arrest felt unreal, like the air itself had been emptied out of the world and replaced with something too still, too fragile to touch. Outside the Whitlow estate, the flashing lights of the police cruisers painted the rain-slick driveway in pulses of red and blue. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke, releasing sheets of water that washed over the cobblestones, over the past, over everything that had just come undone. Inside, the house smelled of cold coffee and adrenaline. Alden Whitlow sat on the edge of the same couch where Marla had once poured him wine laced with poison. His fingers were clenched together, the knuckles white, the tremor in them refusing to stop.
Emma Wale knelt by the fireplace, packing up the hidden recording devices with quick precision.
Keegan Holt paced near the doorway, his phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with Detective Warren, giving a final statement for the record. "Yeah," Keegan said, voice low but firm. "We got it all, the confession, the timestamps, the witnesses." "No," she didn't resist. "She's at county now." A pause. "He's here." Shaken, but alive. He hung up and turned to Alden, his face softening. "It's done, my friend."
"She can't touch you anymore."
Alden didn't answer. He stared at the empty glass on the table, the one he had once held in his hand the night he died. The edges of his memory were sharp as broken glass. "She said I'd never sleep again," he murmured. "Maybe she's right." Emma straightened, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You don't have to tonight. You just have to breathe." Alden looked at her, eyes clouded but grateful. "You talk like a therapist." "Maybe I missed my calling," she said with a small smile. "Or maybe I just know what fear looks like." Detective Warren returned an hour later, his coat dripping from the rain. "We've got both of them in custody," he announced. "Marla Whitlow's being charged with attempted murder, premeditation, and fraud. Troy Kincaid's flipping already said he'll testify for a lighter sentence." Alden's eyebrows lifted. That didn't take long.
Warren shrugged.
"Cowards like him never last under pressure. He's already confirmed everything you told us, the poisoning, the staged accidents, even the payoff to the coroner. You've got nothing left to prove." Keegan gave a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You mean except that he's still human after all that?" Warren nodded slowly. "That part takes longer." He offered Alden a card. "We'll need you at the station tomorrow for the formal deposition. After that, you can rest. I'll have an officer keep an eye on this place for the night." When the detective left, the three of them were alone again, surrounded by the echo of silence, the kind that settles in after violence, when every creak in the floor sounds too loud.
Alden insisted on staying one last night in the house.
"I need to face it," he said.
"If I leave now, I'll never come back.
And I can't let her ghost own this place." Emma stayed, despite his protests. "You shouldn't be alone," she said simply, and that was that. Keegan, too, refused to leave, claiming he'd sleep on the couch though none of them slept at all. They built a small fire in the hearth.
The flames danced, throwing shadows up the walls.
Alden stared into it, the reflection of the fire flickering in his eyes. "I keep replaying it," he said quietly. "Every word she said. Every second in that box."
Ich schuld hatte her.
"Do you?" Emma asked gently. He took a long moment before answering. "I don't know."
Hatte Tages Energy.
"I think I used it all up trying to stay alive." Keegan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then don't waste what's left on her. Use it to build something new." Alden glanced at him.
So meeting like what?
"Like a life that means more than a company ledger," Keegan said.
Juve got a second chance, Alden.
Don't hand it back to her by living in the ruins she made. The words hit him harder than he expected. For years, he had measured success by profit margins and headlines. Now, sitting in the ashes of his own survival, the numbers meant nothing.
Emma spoke up softly.
"Sometimes surviving is the bravest thing we can do. But healing, that's where the real fight starts." Alden gave her a tired smile. "You sound like you've been through your own wars." She looked into the fire. "Everyone has."
Some just hide the scars better.
By dawn, the rain had stopped. The world outside glistened as if scrubbed clean. Alden stepped out onto the porch, the cold air filling his lungs, and for the first time in days, he didn't feel suffocated. The police tape fluttered lazily in the breeze. He stared at the horizon until the first gold of sunrise broke over the trees. Emma joined him quietly, a blanket draped around her shoulders. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Didn't want to," he replied. "It felt like if I closed my eyes, I'd wake up back in that coffin." She nodded. "Trauma plays tricks. It'll take time to unlearn it." "Time," he repeated, tasting the word. "Something I thought I ran out of." He turned toward her, the morning light cutting across his face. "Emma, I don't know how to thank you."
You risked everything for me.
"You don't have to thank me," she said. "You just have to live." That day at the police station was a blur of paperwork, questions, flashbulbs and whispers.
News of Alden's resurrection spread faster than wildfire.
Businessman declared dead, found alive, wife arrested in murder plot, the headlines screamed. Cameras swarmed outside the precinct, reporters shouting over one another as he and Keegan were escorted through a side door. He hated every second of it. The world had turned his suffering into spectacle. Detective Warren guided him through the depositions. Troy's statement matched his. The DA confirmed that with Marla's recorded confession, the case was airtight. Her attorney requested psychiatric evaluation, claiming temporary insanity fueled by unresolved trauma.
The Ironie stung.
By evening, Alden was free to go. No more questions, no more flashes. Just quiet. He didn't go home, not to the estate, not yet. Instead, he followed Emma back to her uncle's farmhouse, the one place that didn't feel haunted. Micah greeted him with a bear hug that nearly crushed his ribs. "You've got 9 lives, son," the old man said, grinning.
Let's hope you don't waste the rest.
They ate stew at the kitchen table. The fire crackled, Scout slept at their feet, and for the first time in weeks, Alden laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that startled even him. When the laughter faded, he looked around the modest room, the ticking clock, the faint hum of the radio, the smell of pine and earth, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: home. Over the next few weeks, life began to rebuild itself, though not in the ways anyone expected. The courts froze Marla's assets, seized her shares of Whitlow Holdings, and formally reinstated Alden as CEO. He refused. "I don't want the company," he told Keegan. "Not anymore. It's yours." Keegan tried to protest, but Alden was firm. I gave it to you once when I thought I was dying. Let's not rewrite that. You've always been the better man for it. Instead, Alden redirected his attention to the town the orphanage Emma volunteered at, the hospital that had taken him in, the people who'd unknowingly sheltered him while the world mourned his name. He poured money quietly, anonymously, into community programs, education funds, and small businesses. When a reporter asked about his new philanthropic direction, Alden only said, "Some debts can't be repaid with money, but I'll try anyway."
Still, the nichts während easy.
There were moments when he woke drenched in sweat, convinced he was back in the coffin, the walls closing in, Marla's whisper in his ear, "You'll never sleep again." In those moments, he'd stumble outside to the porch, breathing hard, staring at the stars until dawn. Sometimes Emma joined him, a blanket around her shoulders, no words between them. She didn't try to fix him, she just stood there, a quiet presence anchoring him to the world. One night, as the wind stirred the tall grass, he said softly, "You know, I used to think love was control. The more you gave, the more someone could hurt you. But maybe it's the opposite." Emma tilted her head. "How do you mean?" "Maybe love is the only thing that frees us if it's real." She smiled faintly.
You sound like a man who's learning to forgive himself.
"Maybe I'm trying," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The trial came months later. Marla appeared in court thinner, paler, her once perfect hair unkempt. She avoided Alden's eyes. When asked to speak, she only said, "I wanted peace. I just didn't know how to find it without destroying his." The judge sentenced her to 25 years. Troy received 10 for accessory and obstruction. Alden didn't attend the sentencing. He told Keegan, "She's already living in her own prison." That evening, he drove to the cemetery to the spot where his false grave still lay under the old oak tree.
The marble headstone glistened with rain.
He stood there for a long time, reading the words carved into the stone.
Alden James Whitlow, 19.792.024. Beloved husband, visionary, friend.
He laughed quietly. "Guess they got 1 out of 3 right." Then, with a shovel borrowed from Micah, he dug the small plaque free and laid it gently beside the grave. "No more pretending to be dead," he murmured. "Not even on paper." Behind him, Emma's voice came soft through the wind.
"Ready to lay it all here."
He turned to her, the last light of day glinting off her hair. "I already did." They walked back to the truck together, the past buried for good this time by choice. Later that night, sitting by the fire in Emma's farmhouse, Alden picked up his journal, the one she'd given him in the hospital. The pages were nearly full now. He flipped to the last one and began to write.
Des gave me silence.
Life gave me witnesses. One tried to bury me, the other dug me up. I was once a man measured by what I owned. Now I am measured by who stayed when everything else was gone. He closed the book and set it on the table.
The fire crackled, warm and alive.
For the first time since the coffin, Alden Whitlow closed his eyes, and this time, he didn't dream of darkness. He dreamed of dawn. The winter that followed came softly to Alderfield, the kind of winter that wasn't cruel, only quiet. Frost edged the fences in silver each morning, the air carried the scent of pine and smoke, and the hills wore a thin veil of snow that caught the first light of day like sugar. For Alden Whitlow, every sunrise was still a small miracle, something he counted without fail. He had once lived by clocks and calendars, meetings and numbers. Now, he lived by the sound of roosters at dawn and the hum of coffee dripping in Emma's kitchen. The farmhouse had become his refuge, small, a little drafty in the corners, but alive in all the ways the Whitlow mansion had never been. He'd moved in quietly after the trial ended, promising it was temporary. Emma hadn't argued, only smiled in that gentle way of hers that made him believe maybe temporary wasn't so bad. Each day began the same way. Emma would wake early, her hair tied up messily, making breakfast while the old radio murmured in the background, an AM station playing songs from decades past. Micah would already be gone to the cemetery with Scout trotting beside him, and Alden would sit by the window, wrapped in one of Emma's worn flannel blankets, writing in the leather-bound journal she'd given him months ago. He wrote about little things: the warmth of the fire, the sound of rain against tin, the smell of pancakes. Sometimes he wrote about her, though he never let her read those pages. It wasn't about hiding, it was about protecting something delicate, something that had bloomed quietly out of trauma and time. Emma never asked. She only placed a cup of coffee beside him and said, "You're writing more again. That's good." "It's cheaper than therapy," he'd joke. She'd smile. "Says the man who can afford the best therapist in the state." "Yeah," he'd say softly, "but none of them make coffee like you." When the frost finally melted, Alden began spending more time in town. The people of Alderfield had stopped whispering his name like a ghost story, now they greeted him like an old neighbor returning home. The press had long moved on to fresher scandals, leaving behind the quiet aftermath of his survival. He started helping at the Sunrise Haven orphanage, the same one Emma volunteered at. At first, he only came to donate supplies and fix leaky roofs. Then, one afternoon, one of the children, a freckled boy named Theo, asked him to read a story out loud. "Me?" Alden laughed, startled. Theo nodded, holding up a worn book with missing pages. "You've got the voice of a narrator," the boy said earnestly.
So Alden riet.
His voice, once used to command boardrooms and investors, found new strength in the rhythm of fairy tales and bedtime stories.
The kids listened wide-eyed, Emma leaning against the doorway with quietpride.
It became a weekly ritual. One Saturday, after the reading session, Emma found him painting the orphanage fence white, sleeves rolled up, face streaked with color. "You're overqualified for this," she teased. He looked up from the brush, smiling. "Maybe I spent too long being qualified for the wrong things." Emma tilted her head. "You think this is what you were meant to do?" He nodded slowly. "I think this is what I was meant to remember: how to be useful without needing to be powerful." Yet healing was not a straight path. Some nights still pulled him back to the coffin, to that muffled silence and the suffocating dark. He'd wake drenched in sweat, lungs burning, heart pounding like a trapped animal. Whenever that happened, Emma would appear in the doorway, wordless but steady. She'd sit beside him on the bed, a hand on his back, guiding his breathing until it slowed.
"In trug se nose," Chet whisper. "Out trug se mut. Jure not tere."
"You're here." And when he could finally speak, his voice would shake as he said, "I don't deserve this. Not after everything." Emma would look at him with eyes that had seen pain of their own and say, "Everyone who chooses to live again deserves peace. Even you." Those words became his mantra. He repeated them each morning before sunrise, until they stopped feeling like something borrowed and started feeling like something true. One evening, as snow began to fall again, Alden received a letter from the state penitentiary. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, elegant, controlled.
"Maler."
He sat with the envelope in his hand for nearly an hour before opening it.
"Alden.
I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I want it. I thought if I could kill the son, I could kill the memory of the father who destroyed me. But all I did was destroy myself. I see that now. They call this place correctional. Maybe they're right. I think about what you said, that I could have told the truth. I wish I had. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear you breathing inside that coffin. And I wonder how I ever became the thing I hated most. I hope you find peace, even if I never do.
Maler."
Alden read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. But that night, he slept without dreaming for the first time in almost a year. Spring came early that year. The fields around the farmhouse turned green again, dotted with wildflowers. Keegan visited often, bringing company papers for Alden to sign his final act of stepping away from the corporate world. "You sure about this?" Keegan asked one afternoon, holding out the last document. "You're really walking away from Whitlow Holdings?" Alden nodded. "I already died in that office once.
I don't plan to be buried there again."
Keegan smiled faintly. "Then what now?" "I'm thinking smaller," Alden said.
Something good. Something real.
That something soon became the Whitlow Foundation, a non-profit focused on mental health support for trauma survivors, veterans, victims, and anyone haunted by silence. Emma helped him design its outreach programs. Her psychology background and empathy balanced his drive for structure. They worked side by side for months, often late into the night, their quiet companionship turning into something wordless but unbreakable. One evening, while reviewing reports at the kitchen table, Emma looked up and said softly, "You know, you've changed." He smiled. "I hope that's a good thing." "It is," she said. "You used to look like you were fighting time.
Now you look like you're walking with it."
On the first anniversary of his death, Alden returned to the cemetery. The morning was bright, the grass soft with dew. Micah was waiting for him near the gate, Scout wagging his tail. "Didn't think I'd see you back here," Micah said. "Neither did I," Alden admitted. "But I needed to thank the man who listened when no one else could." Micah chuckled.
"Don't thank me, son.
"Thank the Lord and my bad hearing. Thought I was losing my mind when I heard that coffin knocking." Alden laughed, and for once, it didn't sound hollow. He walked to the grave, his old grave. The stone still stood clean and well-kept, a relic of another life. He crouched beside it, laying down a single white lily. "For the man who died," he said quietly. "And for the one who lived." Then he stood, turning toward the future waiting behind him. Later that summer, the Sunrise Haven courtyard filled with laughter and light for the opening of its new wing funded entirely by the Whitlow Foundation. The building bore a simple plaque. Dedicated to those who refused to stay buried. The mayor gave speeches.
Keegan handled press interviews.
Micah grilled hot dogs for the kids. Emma organized games and ran herself ragged, ensuring everything went perfectly. Alden stood off to the side, watching her.
She moved trug the Kraut like sunlich tiereles, genuine, grounding.
When she finally stopped beside him, hair tousled, cheeks flushed, he said, "You did all this?" She shook her head. "We did." He smiled.
"No.
You saved me.
Twice."
She frowned slightly.
"Twice.
The first time, you pulled me out of the coffin," he said softly. "The second time, you showed me how to live outside of it." Emma's eyes glistened. She didn't answer, only took his hand, her fingers warm against his.
The music from the children's choir began, soft and pure, rising into the evening air.
Alden looked out over the crowd, at the life he had rebuilt from the ashes of his own grave, and felt something expand inside his chest, something vast and tender and alive. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from anything. He was home. That night, the farmhouse was filled with the scent of fresh rain and jasmine.
The lights were low, the world quiet.
Alden sat at his desk, journal open to a blank page. He picked up his pen and wrote slowly, deliberately. "I used to believe survival was luck. Now I know it's grace. I was buried by betrayal, but I rose by kindness. Emma once told me healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without breaking." She was right.
So tonicht, il remember it all. The coffin, the pine, the fear and the voice that called il back to life.
And for the first time, I'll sleep knowing I no longer owe death anything. He closed the journal, placed it beside the lamp, and turned to where Emma slept on the couch, her hair spilling across a pillow, her face serene. He whispered, "Thank you," though she didn't hear. Then Alden lay down, the sound of summer rain on the roof above him, and drifted into the gentlest sleep of his life. No darkness, no nightmares, only the steady rhythm of 2 heartbeats and the promise of tomorrow. And outside, through the open window, the night carried the scent of life, continuing the low hum of crickets, the sigh of wind through the fields, and the faint laughter of children echoing from the orphanage in the distance. The world he had once lost, now his again.